For the first time ever, I am thrilled to say we have an official sponsor for the Dirt Talk podcast, and that's Ariat. I've worn Ariat boots on every job site I've visited over the years, traveling in them across 5 continents. More importantly, I have yet to find a single project where working folks, unlike me, are not wearing Ariat boots and workwear in every condition imaginable. And there's really good reason for that, and that's because it's phenomenal stuff. And the more I've learned about Ariat and the company, the more I've loved their brand. So with this, Ariat is offering any Dirt Talk listener 10% off their next Ariat order at ariat.com/dirttalk. That's 10% off boots, jeans, and workwear at ariat.com/dirttalk or at the link in this episode's description. With that, let's get to the show. Yeah, it's interesting too with coal, because as you know, a lot of companies are divesting their coal assets to focus on lithium and copper and nickel and whatever it is. But it's still not just a viable business, but like a necessary commodity.
Coal.
Yeah, to do it's funny, they talk energy transition. And so with energy transition, coal can't be in the picture. But steel, but without steel, the energy transition, whatever that means, I'm not totally sure what that means. But without steel, none of that can happen.
None of it can happen.
So without coal,
it's fundamental. It's core fundamental. It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's woke. What we call woke going crazy.
Yeah.
The woke ideology going crazy.
But you don't. It's not even like that complicated to understand.
No, but
like you go like 2 levels.
Yeah, but
it doesn't.
You
matter.
need to have a desire to understand it, right? And if you just want to say the C word is a bad thing,
sure. Well, there's a different C word that Australians say that is a bad thing in America. Yeah, it's somewhat. That's why I think I'm very appreciative of what you're doing, because you have like I can have a rational conversation with you, but I feel like even at a show like this, there's so many people dancing around this reality that is we need more. It's just from the outside, it's odd to me because it feels like they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. We need to really care for the environment, so on and so forth, but we need more mining. And then you have mining executives saying, okay, we're going all in on this energy transition, but we also know it's not physically possible to meet any of these projections, especially like copper, for example. That's the big one. You have like senior mining executives saying it's not physically possible. It's not mathematically possible. It's not financially possible. It will not happen, but we're going all in on it. And it's like, which is it? It's frustrating.
Well, what happens is you get to a point where there's a point of breakage, where people say, they keep on going on the dream and the hype and the verbiage around this ideology, and then all of a sudden there's some sort of come to God moment where they go, right?
But that's what I worry about. When is that going to happen? Because it's almost like it's like the mining industry right now is almost its own worst enemy. Like it's marching itself to its death in a way, which isn't possible. It can't die or else society goes away. It has to break at some point. But it's like they'll have that conversation with you one-on-one at a dinner. But then you read the press release and it says the complete opposite thing. And it's like, to me, it's frustrating because it's like, can't we stand up? Like, when are we?
Can't we be logical? Can't we be
logical? And when are we going to stand up for ourselves?
Oh, I agree. And it's very, very much at the forefront in coal.
Yeah,
because we're the bad guys.
Yes,
it's very much so.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why when I started Pembroke, I'm very sympathetic to the thermal coal argument. As you say, is it plays an incredibly important role in energy. But I made the conscious decision that's not my argument to battle. It's the easier argument for me to battle is steelmaking coal. There's no substitute. So with thermal coal, you have got substitutes, and you can argue with someone whether or not renewables can replace steady state baseload capacity of thermal. But to me, the argument that is harder to argue is coking coal makes steel. There's no substitute. There won't be for another several decades at least. It's needed for all society, but to get people, to maintain and increase our standard of living, to get people out of poverty, for industrialisation. It's the most critical material in the world, steel, and you need coking coal. So that's an easier argument, and that's why we focused on that argument.
Yeah, and they have the whole green steel thing coming about. There's a lot of hype around that, but it's like you just have to like look into it at one level down to understand, wait a minute. Okay, so global steel demand is this. And here's what you can produce annually with this. So yes, is it an alternative technically? Sure. But it's by no means an alternative when it comes to producing steel at scale.
No, it's not. It's simply not. And at what cost, even if you can at scale, at what cost can you produce it without a subsidy?
Yeah.
And also, where are you in the world? Like, I feel, I think it's pretty arrogant of advanced Western societies like US or Australia to pontificate to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Well, we got ourselves to this point through the Industrial Revolution, through carbon steel, through this power.
Yeah.
But you can't. You need to go the hard road. I'm sorry. Yeah. You can't do it. Now, that's an arrogant position in my opinion. So when you look at steel, the developing countries which are around Australia and Southeast Asia, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, they need carbon steel. They don't have scrap even for electric arc furnace.
Sure.
Europe does, but Europe's a whole different world. It's an advanced old economy. The growing economies need carbon steel, and that's where we feed.
And that's virgin steel.
Virgin steel.
Yeah.
And it needs coking coal.
Coking coal and iron ore with a few extra things mixed in, but to make new steel.
Yeah.
And you can recycle steel endlessly.
Yeah.
But you need a certain percentage of scrap and new steel, even when you're recycling it.
Absolutely. And you need to be a more developed economy where you're actually going through the next phase of recycling. When you're a brand new economy like India, which is a very exciting economy, is growing, you need to be able to generate new steel.
Yeah.
What I call new steel. So, look, our attitude to green steel is great. Bring it on. We don't have to talk it down. But, I'm a big believer that I just wish with all these things we'd let the market and natural motivations move the industry the way it is. So when green steel becomes economically viable, if ever, let it come on.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we shouldn't apologise for making new steel in these markets that need people coming out of poverty. Let's be clear here. This is people coming out of poverty.
Yeah.
And we're proud to be part of that story, right? It's not about, we all have to look after the environment. But somebody actually once gave me an example. They said to me, if you had a child, and there was a risk that child wouldn't make it through to adulthood, and there was a button on the table. And you could press that button and guarantee them getting through to adulthood. But in pressing the button, you're releasing X tons of carbon.
Mm-hmm.
What parent wouldn't press the button, right? So it's the more important thing.
Yeah.
And we play a role in that. Also, new blast furnace technology is incredibly efficient. It's amazing.
That's the irony too, though. The government. This has happened in the United States, and this has even happened with coal-fired power plants. Modern coal-fired power plants are remarkably efficient.
Yes.
You still have the emissions, but it's a totally different world to 1970s technology.
Yeah.
But yet they've restricted any kind of innovation or further development. They've done it with the steel industry in the United States too. They've just completely killed the steel industry in America. And so you have these old blast furnaces still running because there's no hope of getting a new one permitted. But if you can build a new one, it can do the job so much more efficiently and effectively and environmentally in an environmentally friendly way. I didn't, like what you're saying too, I didn't really wrap my mind around it. I'm an American. Americans live on an island. We think we're the only ones in the world. We're only 4% of the population though. Traveling's been really good for me because I've started to see other parts of the world, understand, oh wow, this is actually how the world works. And this is what humanity really is. It's been amazing for me, but I didn't really understand it until I visited Bravos for the first time. And I think I was talking with Mick there. I have a great guy. And he was explaining to me, their argument is, I know this isn't your argument, but it's in the same vein. The best thing we can do for the environment is lift people out of poverty.
Yeah.
And the most effective way to lift people out of poverty is to give them power and to give them infrastructure.
Yeah.
And because I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, I've always had power. Yeah. I've always had water. Yeah. I've always had food. Yeah. I've always had infrastructure. Yeah. And so I've just assumed that is just the constant state of the world. Yeah. But you have billions of people in which that's not the constant state. Absolutely. And so when you don't have your basic needs met, the future does not matter.
That's right.
Because you don't know where the next meal is coming
That's
from,
right.
or next week's food's coming from, whatever it is. Until you solve that problem, you don't care about the environment.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've leveraged the Industrial Revolution. We've leveraged all this stuff, and now it's not okay for you to use it.
Now we're lecturing. Now we're lecturing the rest. Yeah. And there's a lot of talk about China and how many coal-fired power stations they have, but that's the reason why they want the right to become a superpower their own way, like everyone else did.
And that's what I struggle with the arguments against. I've been to China. A lot of Americans haven't. There's a narrative about China, but I struggle with that because it's like, well, I don't know. They're prioritizing their country, and their people, and their future. Yeah. So why is that a bad thing? And we can argue all day what the right way to go about that is, but to me, it's like I don't see that necessarily as negative.
Yeah, no, it's not a negative at all.
Yeah,
and look, and to me, it's even more a compelling argument when it comes to steel making coal. It's even more because there's no substitute.
Yes.
It's absurd. The other part which really upsets me is when you overlay Australia. Australia owes its prosperity to mining. 100%. There's just it's not tourism.
Yeah.
It's mining, right? And that was shown through COVID. What kept Australia afloat? There was not even a blip during COVID because the mining industry kept going, right? Tourism was shut down. We were isolated for years. No one could come in or out. But mining kept going. Now, in mining, you've got two massive engine rooms, if you like, the Pilbara for iron ore and the Bowen Basin of Queensland for steel, for steel making coal. I think we should be celebrating that. For some reason, we'll celebrate iron ore, but we won't celebrate coking coal.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing. I mean, I live in Sydney, and you've got people, in areas, very affluent areas of Sydney. Probably a lot of them are ex-investment bankers who've made a lot of money, probably in the mining industry, probably in coal. But they're the biggest vocal. They're the most vocal against coal.
Yeah.
And it hit me the day we funded Olive Downs. We had to sell it. We'd banked Olive Downs against the odds. Construction was able to start. We had a dinner lined up with the banks to celebrate, and in the mail is a bullet to me and a death threat.
Really?
Yes, direct. And we've employed 700 people. We're going to spend millions of dollars in the region. We're doing something worthwhile for humanity. I'm not saying that we're some sort of gods. We're trying to make money as well.
Sure.
But we're doing it environmentally better than anybody has, in my opinion. And you get a bullet in the mail. So that's because I think people have been conditioned. They're fed misinformation.
Yeah.
And it does, going back to your original point, it is flowing through everywhere. So much so that, institutions like some banks in Australia who probably have half their mortgages with people who have some direct or indirect interest in coal won't bank coal. You know, they've gone woke.
Yeah, and that's what's frustrating to me as a young person that loves mining and loves humanity and wants all of this to succeed, is like mining is sitting around like, yeah, you know, who's going to stand up for us? And to me, it's like, it's you guys. Like, when's somebody going to say something about this? Because it's not going to be the politicians. It's not going to be the media. It's not going to be the financial institutions. It's not going to be big business. So it's no one else but the mining industry. And yet I just like, again, that's why getting to know you has been so refreshing, because it's like I can have a real conversation about mining with somebody who's somebody in the mining industry. like what you're doing is kind of a big deal. But until everybody's having that conversation, it's not going to change. You can do your best at all downs, which will make a difference, but at a global scale?
Yeah, I don't know. The answer is I just don't know, and I have to confess I'm sort of jaded as well now. You know, like I don't know whether it's gone too far. I fear very much in Australia that what will happen is in 20 years' time, people will be standing around the barbecue and they'll just go, hey, what happened? The schools used to be better and the hospitals were better.
Yeah.
And standard of living was better. And what happened? And someone will say, well, that was because Putin invaded Ukraine. It's not. It's because you killed your own industry.
Yeah.
And we're so rich in Australia with resources that could happen. That nobody's, you know, you can put all these overlaying burdens on mining and, you know, abuse it basically, but it still delivers.
Yeah.
And it's only when it eventually, decades on, starts to just sort of peter out or suffer that people look around and go, what's going on? Then it's too late.
Sure.
So I think that's my concern. Oh, look, I don't know. In the end, through pure self-preservation, we've just focused on our own business.
Yeah.
You know, because we feel strongly, I feel strongly, but I just, you know, there's enough to do just to focus on my own business to get that up and running and do the best job we can.
Yeah. So going to your own business, because I don't mean to make this whole chat on the political situation of mining on a global scale. How long did it take to illustrate just the amount of hoops you have to jump through? You're a greenfield steelmaking coal operation. How long did it take before you could put a single shovel in the ground?
Well, I look at it, well, there's a number, 3652 is the number of days it took me from when I started Pembroke Resources to when we actually opened the mine.
And that's not 365 1 year.
No, 3652.
There's a comma.
Yeah, that's right. 3,652 days. And that was with all our attention on everything. So the first 2 years was about finding or acquiring an asset. And there's a bit of a unique story around that, how we did that. But you know, once we acquired the asset, it took another 8 years until we opened the mine, and that's fast.
Yeah.
And I would challenge anybody to do it that fast, because we did a lot of things in parallel. We were well funded. We were totally focused. We laid out our Gantt chart, and we made sure that if there's an overlap, we could push them together and do things in parallel. It could easily take double that time.
Did you know it was still going to take a decade when you got into it, though?
Well, when I present Olive Downs, I have this graphic of mountains, right? So it's quite a good graphic. And I say from day one, here we are at the bottom of the hill, and there's a huge mountain to production, huge mountain, and a daunting mountain. But then I clicked the next slide, and another mountain appeared before it, you know,
Sure.
And that was changes of legislation. Another mountain, ESG. Another mountain, less banks financing. Another mountain was COVID.
Yeah,
you know, so the mountains stacked up. So we knew it would be hard, but we didn't see all the mountains that Ray. You know, when you're hiking and you go over the hill and there's another one.
Yeah, false summit. Yeah,
false summit. Exactly. Yeah. That's what it was like. That's what it felt like. So we knew there'd be things, but we thought we could probably do it sooner, but things take longer. Things take longer than you think. There were a few near-death experiences we had along the way, and
as a business,
as a business, and looking back, you can say, well, we did it, but at times, those issues seemed almost insurmountable.
Why? And I asked you this when we were driving around Olive Downs the last time I was there. Why do that? Like, why go on that journey? Because that's not. I like the game of business. You're an entrepreneur, obviously. It is quite fun, but it's terrible at the same time. And so going on a decade-long journey to just get something started, to a decade-long journey to then just start the actual journey.
Yeah.
Why do that?
Well, I think it's probably the answer is probably it's in my DNA and out of my team, right? We've worked in corporates. I started at KPMG of all places, right? Which is very benign sort of corporate sort of, standard sort of operation.
As big business as
big business you get, where, you do this and you go up next year and you get reviewed and, if in my DNA is business and mining's a business and steelmaking coal is a business. I think if you have the opportunity to build something, it's immensely satisfying. So it was interesting. At one stage, there was I think we had someone come in and when we were a small team, we had someone come in and do a interview with people to get a sense of how they're feeling. And the feedback was a lot of them felt incredibly stressed and very demanding, but then they were very satisfied, So it's interesting, that dynamic, and that a certain type of person, I think the reward compensates more than the journey. And also, I mean, it's immensely satisfying. It was like an epiphany for me to drive on site the day our bridge came up out of the ground. It's a major structure. And even though I obviously knew in intimate detail what we were building, to see something come up out of the ground as something tangible, I remember that day, just incredible. So when you go on site and you see all these people and you realise it wasn't that many years ago, these were just paddocks of cattle.
Yeah.
That's something money can't buy. It's satisfying. You feel proud about it, and it's there. And even though we're at the beginning of the journey, no matter what, that's there now. It's there, and it'll be there for a long time. It'll grow.
Was it when you started? Was steelmaking coal always the target? Like, there's a lot of other commodities, like that you probably could have got financed easier, quote unquote, maybe like nickel, like gold, like iron. There's a lot of other commodities out there, especially in Australia. Was steelmaking coal always it?
Yeah, for me, it always was. I mean, I only came into coal 20 years ago. Before that, I had no mining experience, none. I was an accountant, and I had done a lot of businesses, entrepreneurial business in .com and in software and related businesses like that. But I fell into mining and coal mining. Yes, I tell you why I like steelmaking coal, because it has a few attributes that thermal doesn't have. It's a unique product and a brand. You have your own brand. In thermal, it's a commodity on a screen. It's got calorific value, and you sell it at the benchmark price or a discount. Steelmaking coal is unique. There are hundreds of different types of steelmaking coal, even though there's, PLVHCC, which is an index that BHP sells. There are a lot of other qualities under that. And the steel makers, it's like they bake a cake. They take a bit of this and a bit of this and a bit of this, and some of them has high fluidity and some of them has good coke strength, and they blend them together to make the coke cake.
Yeah.
Because of that, you've got interaction with customers about your brand, which I love. So you're not just mining and putting it on a ship. You're going to customers. What do you want? What are the value? What's the value in use of your coal? I love that, because that's the full spectrum. So I think it's very unique that you've got from exploration to actual, customer. I also liked it because there's a much more limited supply than thermal coal. There's a finite amount of good coking coal resources, even more these days. I think it's almost finished now. Yeah. Well, what we've got is what we've got. Even though there's a bit more in the ground, I don't think it'll come out. So I like that it's that. The other thing is it's an industry that is a mining sector that is dominated by one player, which I like. So BMA, the BHP Mitsubishi Alliance, basically has half the world's seaborne trade, right? So I like that, because if you can sit competitively against that producer's cost curve, you're in a good position, because they're not going to be losing money for a long time. There's a lot of supply comes out of the market if they are losing money. It's not viable anymore. So I liked all those characteristics, and I did like, I ran a mine called Gloucester Coal. It was an ASX listed company in Australia. It was in a basin called Gloucester Basin, not the Hunter Valley, its own little basin. And in a way, it gave me a little bit of an insight into what was coming with ESG, because it wasn't the Hunter Valley or the Bowen Basin. It was surrounded by a national park, the only one there. A lot of hobby farms around. We had to be very, very conscious of our surroundings and our footprint and our environmental credentials. It was a nil discharge site. Couldn't discharge any water, not a drop. We had frogs, the giant barred frog. We had, I think, 4 frogs and 3 scientists looking after the frogs.
Sure, yeah.
And that was in 2005-06. So that gave me a bit of an insight. So I think when I looked at what opportunities there were, I think we thought, well, okay, coking coal is, again, environmentally something that we can justify easier. We can find exploration licenses that meet our criteria and can be good for the environment. It sort of ticked all the boxes.
And in Australia, you just referenced there's 2 big coal regions in Australia, the Hunter Valley, which is primarily thermal.
Yeah.
And then the Bowen, which is primarily steelmaking.
Yeah.
And is it the biggest steelmaking producer in the world, the Bowen?
Well, it's the biggest seaborne trader. So there are other basins that might produce, like China's got a lot of coal, Mongolia's got a lot of coal, but it's captive for China.
I see.
Russia used to produce a lot of coal, but it's, for Russia these days at least.
And Australia doesn't consume any of that. It
None.
all goes by
very,
ship.
very little.
Very little. Yeah.
Very, very little.
Yeah, it's like artisanal, steel making. But at production, so the Bowen, you've got this one, like looking at on Google Maps, I talked to a friend of mine about it the other day. It's spectacular, because it's all of these monster operations.
Yes.
Like as big as any mine I've been to.
Yeah.
But just one right next to each other, next to each other, all the way down this exact same geology.
Yeah.
And then it all goes by rail to ships. Like that was the first thing I saw when I flew into Mackay for the first time.
Yeah.
You just look out in the ocean. There's probably 30 ships just sitting there waiting to go get loaded up with coal to go up to Asia. How did you, so cool, we want to do steelmaking coal. How did you, why Olive Downs?
Okay. Well, I was aware of Olive Downs. So it's a long, the history of Olive Downs is actually dates back to 2010. So back when I was running Gloucester Coal, I took Gloucester Coal in a hostile takeover from, I used to work there, I left, then I came back and I took it in a hostile takeover on behalf of a commodity trading company out of Hong Kong. So I came back in as CEO. We bought half of Middlemount up there. We were producing a met coal pure play. We were going to merge with a company called MacArthur Coal. MacArthur Coal was a big coal producer in the Bowen Basin, and Peabody took over MacArthur Coal in 2010. So Gloucester and MacArthur were about to merge. In fact, as I say to people, we actually had the celebratory $1,000 pen because it was done. The deal was done. Peabody came in and grabbed it. So in that back then, MacArthur was started by a gentleman called Ken Talbot, very, very famous and well-respected coal entrepreneur.
Yeah, I've heard that name.
And
before.
yes,
Yeah.
he had a very impressive pipeline of assets, but they were focusing mainly on PCI at the time. So when we were going to merge, we'd looked at all their assets because we were going to merge together. And we'd seen this Olive Downs. Now, they'd done a little bit of work on Olive Downs North, but not this huge area to the south. And look, I'm not the expert. This is where my co-founder, Mark Sheldon, comes in. Mark, who worked with me at Gloucester, Mark always liked this asset. He always liked the characteristics of it. Large open cut, Wrangell's coal. It's the Wrangell's coal measures. Good geology, well understood, close to infrastructure, non-controversial. But it was owned by Peabody, and there's a general rule: major companies don't normally sell their development assets.
Sure.
They just don't sell them.
Yeah.
So we had our eye on it. When we started Pembroke, what we did is a little differently. Well, first of all, what we did is we partnered with a private equity firm, and they committed financing to us, $200 million USD, before we even had an asset. So they backed the team. So that's an incredibly intelligent way to do business. Let me give you the example of why I think this is key to our success. A lot of people find an asset, then they go and look for someone who will partner them in the asset and fund it. To me, that's like having a baby and then finding who the parent's going to be. And then you figure out what religion will it be and what school it'll go to, after the event. It's going to be trouble, right?
Which happens quite often.
That's the general way. Whereas I started dating my backers in 2012. We got married in 2014. We already knew how we wanted to have a family. We knew which kids we might adopt. The first kid we wanted to adopt really was Olive Downs, but when opportunity came to adopt Olive Downs, we did. So it just meant, and the money was there. So it meant it flowed very smooth. So we had what I call Mark's Bible, and Mark's Bible was all of the assets around the world that he ranked, and he ranked them all. Very by geology, by infrastructure.
Steelmaking coal assets.
That
hadn't been developed yet.
Well, that hadn't been developed. Or some that might have been, you could have turned around or whatever. But we liked the blank sheet of paper. We were more focused on that. And at the top of the list was Olive Downs. But if you ascribed a value to Olive Downs based on what Peabody paid for MacArthur, we wouldn't have been able to afford it.
Sure.
So we started knocking on the door, Peabody, and we knocked. And at a point in time, they got into a bit of strife and went into Chapter 11. And at that time, we were able to acquire it. I think the coking coal price was $66 or something at the time, and it ticked up. So the lesson is we were well-funded, well-prepared. The analogy I give is in business, if you want to buy a classic car from somebody that owns a classic car that doesn't really want to sell it, go in and do a deal. But when you've done the deal, don't say, okay, I've got the deal. Now, I'm just going to go and get the money. I'll ask my wife if she'll let me buy it, or I'll get a loan from the bank. I'll be back.
Yeah.
You say, you get them when they want to sell it. And you go, here's the money. Here's the briefcase. No, I'll do it now. Sign. Right? That's how you do a deal of someone who really doesn't really want to sell something. That's what we did with Olive Downs. So hopefully that explains. We always thought it was our pick asset. We were patient. We were well-funded. We liked it because it was huge, good quality steelmaking coal, close to in the best basin in the world, in our opinion, and close to infrastructure. So a mature basin, only 19 kilometres to the main rail line.
Sure.
And also it didn't have any controversial strategic cropping land or something like that, which was very important for us. Simple stories are best.
Yeah.
So that's why. Probably if someone asked me what the biggest risk was about Pembroke's success, it was being able to acquire an asset like that. You can't be certain you can. In fact, we bought an asset, and we have an asset in Indonesia, which we bought in the meantime, a coking coal asset up the Burrito River in central Kalimantan. Good asset, but much smaller. We built that from greenfield. But at one point, that might have been the only asset we were able to acquire.
And the asset's the asset.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any better. It doesn't improve over time. And
That's
so
right.
if you buy the right piece of ground, it's good. Buy the wrong piece of ground,
it's not. And
you can't make it better.
You can't make it better. You can't make it better. You can mess up a good asset.
Sure.
With not very good people.
No, that's never happened. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, and that's a philosophy also that I often talk about in everything we've done. When you buy an asset like Olive Downs, your everything that you do needs to be focused on the fact that it's world class and top tier. Don't disrespect it. Don't do something which is, don't cut corners.
Sure.
Build infrastructure that respects the scale and longevity of the asset.
Mm-hmm.
You can disrespect an asset and you won't get value out of it if you built, say, a cheap processing plant for it or something, or you cut corners here.
The interesting thing about you all too is the private equity component. I don't know, like we don't need to get in the weeds on it, but when I talked to you originally, you wanted to finance it more traditionally, if that's my correct understanding. But the ESG standards of the traditional financiers in the world don't allow for financing coal, even if it's steelmaking coal. So you had to go in a different direction. But then ironically, that different direction has allowed you to do what you've done in a way.
Well, kind of.
It's
I
know it's a lot more complicated than that.
It's kind of like that. The underpinning of Olive Downs has been private equity out of the US.
Yeah.
And they have contributed 900 million Aussie dollars to this project. And it's quite unique because they contributed it from greenfield. They contributed a significant amount of money in the acquisition and development before we even had a mining lease. They made decisions which were quite impressive and entrepreneurial, where, for instance, before we even were fully funded, but I'll talk about that in a moment, they committed to, say, a water pipeline. So, there's a risk that the banks didn't come through and fund. Sure. So you've got a water pipeline, but you can't build an asset. So they've been very long, they've been very committed and extremely loyal. And that's the underpin, private equity. That's been very fortunate for us. And again, they backed me and my team at the beginning before we even had an asset. I mean, that's incredible, but that's good business in my opinion, right? So having had the asset, you've got to have debt to be able to build the asset. And that's what you're talking about. So traditionally, an asset like this would go to banks, probably Australian banks. I mean, it is first or second biggest export in Australia. Mm-hmm. And you'd say, okay, here's a world-class asset. Will you help us fund it? When we first started those discussions, I think there was 20 plus banks that were vying to fund. As the ESG wave built, towering over me, eventually there was only 2 parties, right? And it was crazy.
Regardless of the business fundamentals.
Regardless of business fundamentals. All the business fundamentals were accepted. There was very little discussion because it clearly made sense. It's very robust. It was all around ESG. And as I say to people, the dirty word wasn't cold. The dirty word was new. New became the dirty word because, and this goes back to our discussion earlier regarding executives this day in Western society and how they see mining and how they see coal. They just, if you think about it, they're in the elevator and someone says to them, why are you backing a new coal mine? It's coal. We've got exposure to existing ones. You don't need to back a new one.
Yeah, how dare you?
How dare you? And in as much, it was actually said to me by a senior executive of one bank. He said, I love your project, but it's just not worth my while to explain to someone why we're backing a new one. It just doesn't I don't get enough financially out of it for me to have that argument.
Yeah.
So, because really the reality is, if we really cared for the environment, we'd be developing more new, higher standard environmentally mines and getting rid of the worst ones.
And we'll get to that.
Out of there. So that was incredible. And there was a bank that was financing us, and we'd put a lot of money through this bank, but they changed their ESG, and I went to get a Land Cruiser lease. They wouldn't give it to me. We put $500 million through this bank of equity. Wouldn't give me a Land Cruiser lease. And then later on, I said to my financial controller, I said, there's a bit of extra money in the bank. Can you put it on a term deposit? That same bank, we won't take your money on term deposit. So that gives you a bit of a flavour, right? But having said that, there was a couple of really key banks who chose to go the extra mile and look at a little bit more depth into what we're actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, they embraced it and they said, look, this is incredible. We'll back it. And we're also backed by the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility, which is a government funding source. And fortunately, they backed us.
I see. So you get the money, you buy this piece of land. I think one of the coolest things about Olive Downs is that you were able to start with a blank sheet of paper, which, as we've talked about, is a huge advantage in a lot of ways. It's a huge disadvantage as you're starting up.
Yeah.
But then over the mine life, which is 75 years?
79 years. Yeah.
79 years. So 10 years seems like a lot of time, but this is a 79-year project once it gets producing.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get it off the ground, but then once you get it off the ground, it's advantageous.
Yeah.
How is it advantageous? Why? And I know you're glad about this. Why are you glad you started with a blank sheet of paper?
Well,
now you probably weren't glad at some.
Well, no, you hit the nail on the head.
The
blank sheet of paper was the biggest hurdle because even financing and people were going, there's construction risk.
Yeah.
You know, what in hyperinflationary environment? What happens if we back you and your construction doubles in cost and you're 3 years late, which is what happens when we came in on budget and on time. But that's what why blank sheet of paper is a problem. Look, it just provided an opportunity holistically to what I call implement a better way. So a little bit of it was sort of my a way that I could say, look at this, I told you so,
Sure.
But it's definitely flipping the blank piece of paper over and doing it. So what it enabled us to do is to look at everything fresh. So we bought the asset in 2016. In 2018, land came for sale. So when we bought the asset, that's just the underlying exploration entitlements and the reserves under the ground, right? We had rights to mine, but we didn't own any land.
So it's different. It's different in the United States,
right?
You buy the land, you get everything underneath.
Yeah, no, quite different. We bought the exploration concessions, and we converted them to along the pathway towards a mining lease, and we converted them to JORC reserves, and there was 500 million tons of JORC reserves, but we didn't own the land. Now, when I first bought it, I wouldn't have thought of owning the land, but when it came for sale, I thought, well, here we go. It was 101,000 acres, of which we probably use for the mine, probably 5,000 acres of the 101,000.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I thought, okay, well, we'll buy it because there's nothing better than if you want to develop a mine quickly. If you own your own land, you don't have to ask permission to come on the land. It just speeds things up. It was a large amount of money to spend. It was $52 million to buy the land. The asset cost 100. The land cost $52 million, right? But it was one of the best decisions we made because it gave us certainty of being able to do what we wanted. But it enabled us to have what we have is a campus. So it's called the Olive Downs Complex for a reason. It's not just a mine. So every mine has to put aside a biodiversity offset area. If you disturb land and you're disturbing flora and fauna, you need to put aside somewhere in Australia a multiple of what you're disturbing. So let's say it's a particular plant habitat. You might have to put 2 times what you're disturbing aside.
So it varies what kind of habitat it is.
It varies in habitat and animal.
Yeah, okay.
But for me, we were able to do this on our own campus. So we put we put thousands of acres into what I call a conservation area number one, because a lot of people don't know what a biodiversity offset area is,
Sure.
right? We were able to put that on our own campus. So for me, it's about saying, okay, we've built a mine down here, but we've put 5 times the land aside up here on our own campus forever.
And so with the traditional mines, that offset might be...
Could be anywhere,
anywhere.
Or it could just be paying a fee.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to me, what I want to try and demonstrate is what modern mining looks like. So the first thing was this conservation area.
Yeah.
And you go up there and there's a lookout and you can see it's not a national park. It's better than a national park. It's virgin flora and fauna bushland.
It's beautiful.
That will never, and it'll be enhanced back to its natural state. There'll be areas that are open, areas that are heavily wooded. You know, you can't just put any land aside for this. By the way, it must meet the right criteria. But it's important to me that we've taken responsibility for it on our own land. That's the first thing we did. The next thing we did is we're building a solar farm to take care of our power needs for the plant, first stage of the plant, on our campus. The next thing is we have a large cattle enterprise, so 8,000 head of cattle. This is a large station, you know, if you want to call it in US terms, you know.
Yeah.
We call it a farm.
Well, that's an Australian term. It'd be like a ranch.
It's a ranch.
It's
a large ranch. Yeah. Well, 100,000 acres is quite a large ranch, right?
Yeah. That's a big ranch.
Yeah. And I'm proud of it. I love it.
That's so much land you won't ever see it all.
That's you can go from one end to the other for an hour and you're still on your own property.
Yeah.
I mean, in this area for cattle grazing, they use helicopters to muster the cattle.
Yeah.
It's great land for cattle. It'll always be cattle grazing land. It doesn't have to be a mine. And, we've got that enterprise, so that keeps going.
Yeah.
Then the key and what we're known for a lot is our koala and greater glider clinic. So the history of that is we obviously have koalas living in proximity to the mine. The federal government of Australia says you need to make sure you don't disturb the koala. And the greater glider is is a possum with big membranes.
Sure, yeah.
A flying squirrel, as I've said to you before.
Yeah.
Right? Now we just went the extra mile and we said, okay, rather than donate money to a university, I think they wanted us to spend $100,000 a year for 10 years. We built our own clinic. So let me go back one step.
So you can just write a check to a university.
That was the condition.
Check the box.
Our condition was to spend $100,000 on specific things per year for 10 years.
I see. Right? Okay.
And fine. But, in a new mine with a blank sheet of paper, why not do it better? So what we did is, first of all, we identified where the koalas and greater gliders live. They live near the river. There's a river there. It's really sand. There's no river flowing. Only in rain events does it flow.
Yeah, like a wash, yeah.
It's like a wash.
Yeah.
And it's called the riparian zone. It's along the river. So that's where they all live, not out in the open, in the fields. So we didn't mine anywhere near there. We stayed away from that area. Then what we did is we thought, well, let's go the extra mile. Let's see if we can add to the knowledge and research of these two endangered species for the good of Australia. So we started a program. We built a clinic on site. It's staffed by specialist veterinarians and ecologists, wildlife specialists. We've tagged all the koalas. As you know, I can see them all on my phone by name where they are.
Yeah, that was one of the funniest things. When I first met you, you pull out your phone and show me where all the koalas are.
That's right. By name and where they've been and who they're associating with. And we put up 600 nest boxes in trees for the greater glider with cameras in many of them. So the main thing is we're researching the species in its natural environment. It's not a zoo. It's not a conservation area. It's not a mine. Yeah. It's nature. So we can't pick them up and hold them like politicians do. No, these are wild beasts. Sure. So we research them, we take them, we check them out, we do DNA, we do ultrasounds, we do all sorts of tests, then we put them back up the same tree. They're out, and we monitor them. And we're doing six scientific papers on these species. The idea is we're getting insight, particularly the greater glider. No one's researched them before. Where do they live? Do they translocate? What's their genomic sequencing? All this sort of stuff. We're learning this about it. Now, that's for the greater good. It's costing us a lot of money, but it's something that we're proud to do. And you get people that are very jaded saying, oh, yeah, it's, a mining company.
Yeah.
I'll match this against any wildlife organization in the world, what we're doing. We're very proud.
Yeah. Well, I got to see it all. And it's you can tell it's genuine. Like, you can tell when something's not. I see plenty of that.
Yeah.
Big companies doing big company stuff because we're going to check the box. We're going to make it look good. Bring your cameras over here.
Yeah.
But it's just so genuine.
Yeah.
Like, none of what you were doing was because we were there.
Yeah.
We coincidentally caught one of the koalas coming in because that you kind of picture it like a zoo almost. Like, these are just koalas you can just go up and pet. But then they're showing us the footage of them catching the koala that morning. This thing's like jumping from tree to tree, screaming.
That's
like,
right.
This is as wild as it gets.
Yeah, they're wild.
And they track them with the drones, with these thermal cameras to spot them in the tree. The whole thing's spectacular.
Yeah.
And then all the tests that they do, and we could only touch it because they put it under.
That's right.
Because it's a wild animal.
That's right.
They couldn't do any of this if it wasn't under. Otherwise, then the whole thing was spectacular.
Yeah, look, you said something about it's real. It's very important to me. Let me go back to the original concept of ESG and all that sort of stuff. It's great. I think it's pretty simple. I wish that what we should be doing, in my opinion, we need mining, we need coal mining, we need steel-making coal mining. Let's just try and do it the best way we can. That's all. Let's try and minimize our impact on the environment. That's tangible. So the way I think about it is, if you can't be on our site and point to the things we're doing, it's not real.
Sure.
The conservation area is there and the solar's there, but the koala and greater glider, it gets a lot of resonance because people do see it as real. And I think it plays a role in our credibility. It sets new standard for the mining industry. But also, if you think about the young generation coming into mining now, even if you're driving a truck, I think a lot of them want to be working for a place that cares for the environment. They want to be proud to work where they're working. And this is a way that they can be proud. They're doing it differently. The other thing that we do, which is really exciting, we won a Queensland Environment Award for it a few months ago, is our clearing protocols. So we have to clear trees. Every single tree that is cleared is checked 4 times by ground reconnaissance, by infrared drones, up an elevated work platform looking at every nook and cranny. If there is a critter in anything, they're taken out, the hole is closed, they're relocated, they go up and check that they haven't come back overnight. 4-phase protocol. Now, these people that do this are called spotter catchers. They're ecologists. There could be a dozen on our site at any one time if we're clearing. And this is a protocol that can be used elsewhere in the world, but I'm not aware of it. It could, like, any development should use it. Any development, caravan park, housing estate, mine.
Well, I know a lot of developments have gotten hot water in Australia for not using it.
Yeah.
As of recently too, you see it quite often. Actually.
Well, we think we've set a standard here, and what really resonates with me is when I hear an ecologist say to me, "I've never been on any development anywhere," and they're not a mining guy, they're an ecologist. Never been on any development anywhere that does this sort of level of care. That's very, very fulfilling, but that's real. It's real,
yeah.
And it's passing the pub test, as I say in Australia, and that's what you've got to do. Otherwise, so I talk less about emissions, although we can talk that way, but I talk less about emissions and more about the environment, which is pretty simple, isn't it? Just try and minimize your impact.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel like so many people are so caught up in the abstract of it, like the offsetting, like the carbon credits, so on and so forth. I don't know what any of that is because it's just like, it's just up in the air.
Well, this is what
I can't see it.
I laugh at, when I get on my emails or hear in the media, an accounting firm or a law firm or a bank talking about sustainability.
Yeah.
You're what? You're a bank. You're an accounting firm. What
It is funny.
What is it? Like, we have an impact on the environment, but we're the ones that can implement real sustainability through our practices.
Yeah.
It's real.
The people in the companies that I've seen care most about the environment are either the mining companies or the forestry companies.
Yeah.
it's consistent.
Yeah.
Because these people, they feed their families with the land. So they know they have to care for the land.
They respect it.
And that's always ironic to me, that the people in the cities that might go camp once a year out in a nice area are the ones saying, no, this is what you need to do with the land. When the people who live off the land, like it's so disjointed.
It is.
But that's what I love about the Olive Downs complex is you can see all of it. Like we got to see in one day everything. We got to see the mining operations. We got to see the technology. We got to see the train getting loaded out. So we got to see the mine, but then we got to see the koalas. We got to see the conservation area. We got to see the cattle. We got to see it all, to see the new infrastructure getting put in, the bridge, and then the town and all the people coming and going. So you see the economic benefits from you see it all.
Yeah.
It's all just right in front of you. None of it is abstract.
No, it's not.
And so this is going back to the blank sheet of paper. It's allowed you to do that. Yeah. Whereas these other big mines, what they have is what they have.
You can't go back.
They can't go back.
No,
it's just like
you can't. And look, even the other thing that's embedded in that we haven't even talked about is mine design and rehabilitation. And again, with the blank sheet of paper, you can do we've done a lot. So we've stayed out of areas that 10 years ago they might have mined. We could legally mine it, but we stayed out to keep that area native vegetation forever. Then we designed our mine so that we could rehabilitate quickly, backfill and rehabilitate quickly. That's the other part we did. That's all. You can't do that after you've been in operation for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years.
Yeah.
So, our landforms, we've designed them so that they're superior landforms with, gentler slopes, all this sort of stuff. Now, this costs money, but we did it because we can do it, because we should be doing a mine to 2024 standards, not 2004 standards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our responsibility, and I think that's what we've done.
Yeah, it's funny too. We've talked all this long, and we haven't actually talked about the mining, which is what I would probably traditionally talk about. But I think, like I said, the mining's spectacular. Seen a 9800 sitting on a bench loading an autonomous truck. It's intoxicating. It's as cool as it gets for somebody like me.
Yeah.
But what was so cool too, I was really glad you were the one taking us around, because I think we talked about it a little bit. I live in this world where I have a big vision, but it's hard for me to articulate, and it's hard for other people to understand. And so it's isolating in a sense, but it's really cool to see somebody else with a big vision, and not just a big vision, but here's the vision, but then here it is. And to see it, like, and it's like, for me as a young entrepreneur, it's like, well, this is what's possible. Here's a team of people that said, no, we're going to go do this. And then it's as real as anything else I've ever seen. And I do want to also stress, we can talk some numbers here too, that drive home the point. This is not like a hobby mining operation.
Oh no.
This is a mining operation. I mean, it is a big time operation.
Look, when it's fully developed, it'll be one of the biggest steelmaking coal mines in the world.
Yeah.
So the again, this is the key. Get your foot on a good asset in steelmaking coal and don't stuff it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we went for the environmental authority, which is the main authority you need from the government that gives you all your permitting conditions. We went for one for 79 years for 20 million tonnes per annum. We're doing 6 million tonnes now. So we looked at it and we said, okay, it's a very large mine, but let's get the approval for the big picture.
Yeah.
Dick. Then let's build certain infrastructure for the big picture, like the rail loop and spur. That'll do 20 million tonnes. The power lines will do 20 million tonnes. We embedded capital into those. Now, when we're doing 6, we can go from 6 to 12 or 13 by just simply building another processing plant in the designated area in the complex, and then opening up the mining horizon. It's a bit more complicated than that, but that's how it is simplistic.
Sure.
So that's a unique. Many mines in the past got a 10 or 15 year approval, and then they have to come back and get another one.
Yeah.
So
kick the can down the road.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we've done it a bit differently that way. But yes, it'll be, 6 million tonnes is a large operation, by world standard.
Yeah.
Within 3 years, we want to be at 12 or 13 million tonnes. That'll be one of the largest. And then eventually, when we implement the final stage, it'll be 20 million tonnes. That is a monster.
And that's 20 million tons of steelmaking coal going down that rail line in a 1 year period.
Yes.
On top of all the earth moving and everything,
Yes.
and all the reclamation efforts.
Yes.
Just final product.
Yes. That's the run of mine.
Yes.
It goes to the plant. It's 15 million tonnes final product.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because you have to process it to get the quality that you need.
Yes, you do.
That you talked about, that brand.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
So and we love that about the asset. The best, putting my business hat on, the best businesses are ones that are simple to understand, that are simple businesses, and that's what this is. One
consistent.
Mine. Inconsistent. One mine, one location. For Olive Downs coal, it's one seam. A couple of seams in, but one mine.
Sure.
It's not all sporadic all over the place. It's in its essence a fairly simple operation.
But that's also what I love about mining is you can see it.
Yeah, I love it.
There's, I grew up in a wealthy area, and I always assumed, but it was a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people that had started with nothing and pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, quote unquote, and built something. And so they all built something tangible. So I assumed that any wealthy person had done that. But I've realized the majority of wealthy people, more often than not, push paper around. I've started to realize there's just a lot of just pushing paper around. There's not real value creation. You can make a ton of money without necessarily creating real value.
Or having any risk.
Yes. And there would be people that would argue with me on that. But I haven't seen anything to prove the contrary as of yet. But that's what's so appealing about construction or mining.
Yeah.
You can see it all.
Yeah.
And you just go out, you can just go and look at the overlook.
Yeah.
You stand in the overlook and you can get it.
Yeah.
There's no complex explanation necessary.
Yeah.
All it takes is just, here it is.
And that's, I think that's where people can talk down to mining sometimes. You're digging it up and you're putting it, but that's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's incredibly, and it's actually very sophisticated these days, right?
Correct. Yeah.
But it's wonderful. It's tangible. I mean, I worked in software and advertising when I left the accounting profession. And they advertising particularly is the opposite, right? It's all these egos and thoughts. What is it?
Yeah.
I love it. I love also the people. The people are wonderful people at work. I mean, the Bowen Basin is it's a place that is it's not easy to live there in summer, but these are hardworking people that want to get ahead in life. I have huge respect for them. Huge respect.
Yeah.
They're not lazy. They're opposite of lazy. And that's what I love about it as well. It's the tangible nature of that material, commodity, but also the tangible nature of the people working there.
That's why I struggle going into some parts of society now, because I'm surrounded by these hardworking people who create value.
Yeah.
Throughout their entire lives.
Yeah.
And it creates a different kind of person.
Yeah.
And now that I'm with those people, those are the only kind of people I want to be with now, because they're grounded. They're, as a whole, there's a sense of humility there, because they're battling the environment. There's so many things outside of their control, but they do it nonetheless. And then they also make a ton of money themselves.
They can make a ton of money, but they're putting their own livelihood. They're risking their own, it's not an easy path, put it that way, compared to an investment banker or somebody who's made a lot of money. Yeah. Half on the industry. This comes back to our original point about, that's why it's particularly upsetting when there's criticism from those people
who've probably never been on a mine site.
Probably never been on a mine site, but have made money out of it nonetheless. And or they're part of a big corporate, machine that have just risen through that.
Yeah.
Again, it comes back to that. You asked me that question before. Why do it? It's enormously satisfying to create something. I was sitting on that 9800 a while back, and I love that. Olive Downs is pretty unique. When do you get to go on your own mine site and blow things up, play with trains, and then sit in big diggers, right?
There's nothing cooler.
It's pretty good. But I was on the 9800, and I said to the guy, I was on there for 3 hours because you can't just get on and get off.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, thank you for that. And he said, no, mate, thank you, because if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be here. What a compliment. What a compliment.
Yeah.
And that's why it's very satisfying.
Yeah, I have sat in the buddy seat of a 9800 a few times. I don't think there's anything cooler than sitting in the buddy seat of a 9800.
It's fantastic.
It is mesmerizing.
It is.
It just takes me right back to my 6-year-old self.
Yeah.
And I'm just entranced by what's happening right in front of me. And just this, you forget the scale of what that machine's doing, and then you walk up to the bucket and you're like, oh, I post pictures, I post videos. I posted a video the other day, 80 tons per pass. Yeah. And people were arguing, that's not 80 tons, that's way smaller. I'm like,
no. It's 80 tons.
It is 80 proper tons.
That's right, it is.
Let me tell you.
Every scoop. And the way it just grabs down the tooth, they explained to me how the tooth on the very end wears out first, because that's the leading tooth that pulls down the face. It's interesting.
I think that's another big difference between Pembroke and some of the big international mining companies too. The big companies, and I think this is just a reality of big companies. They have all this talk about innovation and being quick and nimble, but they're suffocated by their size and the bureaucracy that you have to. I don't think you can get to a certain size without going in that very bureaucratic direction. I just don't. I don't see it. I don't see it working really. But you all, how many people technically work for Pembroke?
There's about 35 people.
35 people, and you have with these big companies, and it's not people's faults, but it's just stuff moves slower, and because they're just in this bigger behemoth, and it just and they're further removed from things. It just kind of bogs everything down.
Yeah, it can't look. I think it's a huge advantage. I think if you can hit the right note between having the quality of decision making and governance of a large company, but the nimbleness and entrepreneurial and speed of a small company.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
You hit a note. That's quite difficult. And funnily enough, that's where you need expertise of people who have that in their DNA. And that's more important than actually mining expertise. That's how they operate, right? And it's interesting that changes over time as well. I mean, I could talk to you also about how a business changes from when there was 2 people when we started it to now. If you include our contractor, there's 700 people.
Yeah.
Culture changes too, and the people that might have got you from the journey from year 1 to year 8 might not make it through to year 10, because you then, at the point we are now, you can't have an executive who's across every decision. You've got to start to side of them a bit more. But there's a few examples of where that really played a part that I can remember. When we got when we bought it, the next day we had to quickly put baseline studies in for various groundwater monitoring. But there was the rainy season coming, and if that came, we would have no access to site, and we'd lose 6 months of baseline.
Because you didn't have that bridge in?
No bridge in. No bridge in. Yeah. So I remember we went and got these all-terrain vehicle dune buggy things. We went and quick put them on our credit card that afternoon. Quick, get it now. Get it shipped to the site this afternoon, and get out and put the instrumentation, on site. Yeah. Just a really small thing. We could have lost 6 months by not doing that, right? The other example was our Indigenous traditional owners. We were able to meet them days after they got federal determination from the government as to their native title. And when you have a discussion with a partner, very important partner like that, I think there's a huge advantage being able to say, well, myself and Mark will agree with a deal for the life of the mine. We don't have to go back to London or St. Louis or,
wait for the next board meeting.
No, we don't. Well, what do you want? What do you need? Yes, done. Handshake. And we've sat in lounge rooms of landholders and had pancakes, and we can, good or bad. We're not saying that everyone loves us, but at least the buck stops with us.
Sure.
And it's our reputation. It's our baby. And I think that's a huge advantage compared to somebody that's a middle manager. The other thing I think is really important is, and my whole team, I like my team to understand the whole operation. So the geologist should understand what happens with mining and processing all the way up to the customer. And I developed that with Gloucester Coal. It was a small enough company that I could see from the beginning to the end how it all sits together. Big corporates, there's a guy that has no idea. He just puts that coal on that stockpile. He wouldn't know how it's marketed, what its value and use is, who the customers are, what they're looking for, right? Again, business 101, understand all the components, how they fit together, and you can add value because you understand how they generate value in individually.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been to a lot of mine sites too. It's all cool. I love every mine site. Everybody's like, what's your favorite? I don't know my favorite. I like them all. And they think I'm bullshitting. I'm like, no, I'm not. I love them all. It doesn't have to be big or sexy. I just love it.
Yeah.
But there's most of them are quite sterile. There isn't really like, and it's hard to explain because it's nebulous in a sense. But you can't really put your hands around. There's no feeling to it. But you go to the Olive Downs complex and there's just, for whatever reason, a feeling to it. And that could be nonsensical. I don't know. But I feel like it is quite, it is real because you all are so close to it and so invested in it and so emotional about it in a very positive way. There's more to it than it's just a mining company. Just get the coal out of the ground, shut up and do your job. Because I've been to some mines that are not just sterile but just miserable. Like it's just like a miserable place. Just no one wants to be there, but they're getting paid so much money. They've got families to feed.
Yeah.
It's a job no more. And I'm sure there's people that work at your mine like any other mine. I'm here to run digger.
Yeah.
I'm not here to do anything else. But most everybody I've met there's more to it.
Look, it's enormously satisfying to hear you say that. That's the goal. We want, and it's the challenge as you grow. But I think there's a huge advantage if people have a vested sort of ownership of the business.
Yeah.
Here's an example, a bit of an inspiration for me. I went to a steel mill in India, one of the major steel producers, and it's a campus. It's built in an area where there was a lot of poverty, and they put the steel mill there, even though it wasn't the greatest for logistics, but they built it there. It has accommodation areas, gardens, cafeteria. It's magnificent. Mm-hmm. And they talk about the complex. And when the guy took us around, he was saying, this is my garden, this is my cafeteria, this is my... And I said to the chairman of that steel mill how impressed I was because he felt that was his. And that made an impression upon me. So that's what I want for us. And I can see it. And yes, indeed, there are some people that don't buy into that. They want to do the job, and that's fine.
Yeah, they don't have to.
But the people that I really value are the ones that are emotionally attached to the asset like it's their own business.
Yeah.
And so if somebody puts a sign in and it's not straight or it's wrong, they say, hang on, fix that, or the branding's not right, or somebody's disrespecting the mine in some way. They take it personally. Now, some can think that's aggression, but it's passion.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard that word. There's a passion, but from my team there to develop the project, and they recognise there'll never be an opportunity to start something from scratch like this before, and they relish that and they live it. If you could bottle it, it'd be incredible.
Yeah, but that's why it's hard for me to explain.
Yeah,
it's very real, but I can't really put words to it. You kind of have to experience it,
and we need to keep it. That's the challenge.
So that was the next thing that I I thought was quite interesting the last time I saw you all. You have the contractor. So Pembroke has 30 something people.
Yeah.
But you've referenced 700 plus
Yes.
working at the operation. And this is what's interesting about Australia. It's a big difference between Australia and America. If it was in America, Pembroke, big bad mining company, we do everything ourselves. We don't need anybody's help. And there's some advantages to that, but you all have brought in a mine contractor, Tees. And then you have, is it Sedgman running the plant side of things. So you have Sedgman on the plant side, Tees on the mining side. But what it's the little things that I think are so important. On everybody's shirts, you could, and we talked about this, you could easily be the big bad mining company and say, this is Pembroke. You do as we say, and you're on our team. We don't care about what you guys got going. This is our turf. You could do that, but you've tried to bring these companies in, and like everybody's shirts, it's not a Tees shirt, it's a Tees Pembroke shirt, or it's a Tees Sedgman shirt, which I think is,
and our team are Tees Sedgman and Pembroke.
Tees Sedgman Pembroke, So it's and that's it. To some people, that probably seems dumb or insignificant, but I think that's one of those very significant things. We're all in this together.
Yeah,
it's not. We're not on different teams here.
No,
we might work for different companies. Our paychecks might say something different, but here, all the same goal.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of things like that come under the umbrella of new mine, get it right at the beginning, and it's even the color of the shirt as well. We have yellow high vis, and we want everyone to have yellow because it's one team. And Tees don't normally wear yellow; they normally wear orange. So, but we wanted them to wear yellow and embrace. So and they did. They've been very compliant that way. And look, it is one team. We will only succeed to the fullest extent we can if everybody's singing in the same way. It's not to say that it's easy, but it's certainly achievable on a mine like this, and that's what we aim to do. And it's one of the things I want. One of the components of the complex which we have yet to do, which I'm very, very focused on, is our mining camp, which is not a mining camp; it's an eco village on site, which will be open to the public as well, which will be a little bit more like a resort than a mining camp, with a cultural heritage centre and a mining theaterette to talk about it. The reason why that's important is I want to keep the culture of site at site. I don't want it mixing up with other mines at another camp. And so that's, we need to get proper permits for that, but that's what we want to do. And that is important, like you say, that everybody's integrated to the same goal. And as much as we can, we share with our contractors the ownership of the success of Olive Downs. Very important.
Yeah, I think it's quite fascinating, but it requires a degree of humility on your part to do that, because it's a lot easier to say no, you're playing by our rules. Yeah, because you can say that.
Look,
you can do that.
It requires humility from the contractor and us. And I think that's.
Tees could also tell you
they could.
Rocks.
Come on, But so I think it's we have those discussions on a regular basis. We have connections from the top all the way down, and there is an alignment that it's a true partnership, and I think that's hugely beneficial as we go forward.
And then I guess to wrap up, because I know you've plenty going on today. Numbers. What are the big picture numbers of the operation to illustrate just how you've said 15 million ton, 79 years. So what is that in reserves?
We have 525 million tons of reserves, open cut.
That's a lot of coal.
That's a lot of coal. We've got billions underground, but we don't need to go underground. Yeah. We've got enough. Yeah. Certainly, you might be around. I won't be around. And so there's plenty of coal. Again, just to go back, why we love Olive Downs is having a large scale and a lot of coal means you can then drive better outcomes because you're not trying to grab every ton and think, I can't lose that. Yeah. You can say, well, look, okay, we won't do that, even though it's coal there, because it's better for the environment. This sort of thing. So it's huge that way. Yes.
I see. Yeah, it gives you that flexibility. Yeah. Plan it accordingly.
Yeah. So 525 million, there's, much more than that in resources. It's 6 million tons now, going to 12 or 13 within 3 years, and then we integrate the other domain, which is called Wollonga, and that gets us to 20, all through the same processing centre at Olive Downs, using the same rail loop to the ports.
It's crazy. Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to get back out there. It's weird. I love Australia. I'm just in love with Australia. Culturally, just the whole place is extraordinary. But I love, for whatever reason, we did a little bit of Hunter Valley. We've done WA. I think it's all spectacular. But I don't know why the Bowen Basin, it just is it's just spectacular in a different way.
It is
to me. It's just so. I can't put it into words.
It's very unique, isn't it?
It's so unique.
Yeah.
Then you have all these small towns.
Yeah.
And every small town has like a dragline bucket sitting out front.
That's right.
That's painted.
That's right.
It's like the biggest attraction in town.
Yeah.
And then every town has a pub.
Yeah.
And every pub is full of miners.
Yeah.
Every single night.
Yeah.
And every road is full of utes with different numbering on the side of each.
Just doing their
flags.
thing. Yeah. Just quietly doing their thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. It's this whole part of the world that really no one knows about.
Yeah.
That's a big part of the global economy.
It's the engine room of the world.
Yeah.
It's one of the engine rooms of the world.
And I think that's what I love about it. The Pilbara is the same way.
Yeah,
it's like this in the grand scheme of things, it's not a little region, but like this one little spot of the earth is feeding so much of humanity.
Yes, it is.
And no one knows this place exists.
Yeah.
And yet they depend on it every day. And I love just being involved in that and giving those people a little bit of credit because they deserve a lot more than I can give them. But I think that's why it's so.
And I think when you come out, what we love is your passion and the ability to explain it. You explained it in your video better than I've explained it to my wife about what we do. So that's good.
It's my job, so I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, Barry, thank you, and hopefully we see you soon.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Cool.